This is John Gilroy from the Federal Tech Podcast.
And this is Brian Gilkey from Siren.
Today, we're going to talk about search-based investigative platforms. Hit the music, Manny.
Welcome to the Federal Tech Podcast, where industry leaders share insights on innovation with a focus on reducing cost and improving security for federal technology. If you like the Federal Tech Podcast, please support us by giving us a rating and review on Apple Podcast.
Welcome to the Federal Tech Podcast. My name is John Gilroy, and I will be your moderator. Today's guest is Brian Gilkey. He's a sales director at a company called Siren, SIREN.io. A few months back, I was at an event called the Elasticon. And Elastic is this fantastic new way to search. And I was trolling different booths over there, and I stumbled on these guys from Ireland or from, I don't know. And I looked at them. I said, a third grader could figure out what you're doing because it's very, very visual what it takes. It takes all kinds of pieces of information, structured, unstructured, and puts it in a way where low IQ people like me can understand it. And I'm thinking, I talk to the people and they say, look, law enforcement has to have quick answers. They can't wait 10 hours for an answer. And if they can have a quick visual answer, I said, well, geez, that's what I want to introduce my audience to. So that's why I have Brian in the studio. Brian, perhaps you can give maybe a thumbnail sketch of Siren, then we'll jump into the interview.
Happy to do it, John. Thank you again for having me on the podcast. And yes, it was fantastic meeting you at Elasticon. And I enjoy listening to the stories that you tell and others tell as well about how appealing Siren looks when they first see it. And that's the goal, obviously, is to make information retrieval a little bit easier and make more sense, right? And as I mentioned to you, Siren's been around for about 10 years, and it came out of academia and at the university in Ireland in Galway by our founders, and then grew into what is our company today, right? And so we're a global company, offices all over the world, and customers all over the world in the primarily investigative intelligence space. And so that can mean just about anything, as you can imagine, right? From law enforcement, as you mentioned, to intelligence, the intelligence community, the defense community, pharmaceutical research, you name it. So anybody doing investigative or intelligence work, right, would find Siren very interesting.
Well, when I first got to college, my first job was teaching English. I like to pull back my English roots from decades and decades ago. So I'm going to pull up a book from 1834. It's a poem called The Rime of the Ancient Mariner. And you know what I'm coming to. This is what it said. It said, water, water everywhere and not a drop to drink. That's the position my listeners are in. Data, data everywhere. And what the heck we got here? I don't know what we got here. And all of a sudden there's new stuff coming in. And by the time you figure out there's more coming in. And so, I've looked at all kinds of different search devices, and this Elastic, this seems to be a tool that's, I don't know how it seems to juggle quickly, huh?
Right. No doubt about it. So it's been a generational problem, right? As I always tell my customers, as I always tell my friends in the business, we've been at it for a long time, right? Everybody that's been in this particular world is saying, oh, man, there's data everywhere. So you are absolutely right. And it's how do you make sense of that data? Well, there's two particular problems. And Elastic is great a partner as they are to us. They do a fantastic job of being able to provide what I would call a landscape to retrieve some of the information that people have difficulty getting access to, right? Because over time, these silos of information have just been built up, and everybody has always talked about that, John, right? And so Elastic, fantastic architecture in order to create a space in order for people to do search, right? However, where Siren steps in is taking that one step further for the specific users within an organization. And what I mean by that is whether or not you're an investigator, whether or not you're an analyst, whether or not you're a researcher, right? Your demand for what I would call relevant information or information that is joined or connected to something else is very, very important, right? And it speeds the process to what the most important part of the whole puzzle is: actionable intelligence. I need to be able to tell somebody that here is what I've come up with, give them a report, give them a chart, give them a diagram that led to actionable intelligence. And that's where Siren is really good at.
Yeah, in fact, go back to the booth. As I walked by the booth, I saw something very visual. Now, so let's say it's my first day at the job at a law enforcement agency, and I walk by a screen and I just see lines of code. Well, I got to be lost. It may take 6-8 months just for me to get my working shoes on and find out where the cafeteria is. I mean, and so I think with this type of presentation software, business intelligence, threat intelligence, I don't know what to call it, it allows people to get up and running quicker and get some of those basic raw analytical capabilities and put them getting the bad guys.
Yeah, absolutely. And ultimately that's the goal, right? So there's bad actors out there all the time, and they're getting smarter, they're getting better. I mean, we see them on the news, right? Whether it's malware, whether it is a foreign nation, whether it is somebody perpetrating a crime, right? And so they dominate. That dominates any sort of news cycle of things that we're paying attention to, right? And so how do you combat that, right? And so you combat that with technology, right? You can only throw so many human beings at a particular problem, right? So leverage technology in order to find bad actors, break up organizations, things along those lines. Now, let me go back to what you were just talking about, because it sort of marries up well with a poll that we did through the Government Business Council. Siren kind of did with the GBC, and that in there you touched upon ramp up time, training time, new person looking at this stuff, and how overwhelming it can be. And the root cause, or what you just described, is the amount of data and the amount of tools that are available to someone walking into a job. Makes it complicated, right? So training somebody on a multitude of different types of information, and we call it OSINT, we call it human intelligence, we call it geointelligence, we call it image intelligence, and their head is literally swimming, right? So the ability to deliver this type of information in a single platform, right, really shortens that particular training time, as you referred to, right? And so that's just one area that I believe that Siren One is really making a difference in the marketplace.
Well, you covered some of the ints, the OSINT, the HUMINT, the SIGINT, but at 3:00 today, I'm going to interview a gentleman about some satellite technology. And now we have GeoInt. Hey, you're riding a bicycle, you're juggling. Hey, let's attach a log to that. It's even more information to come in, and very difficult actually to take that information and incorporate it into something that's understandable, isn't it?
Absolutely. That's the root of what Siren is all about, right? And so we talk about silos of information, and everybody talks about specific types of intelligence or information. And you bring up GeoInt. So the panacea, or the goal at the end of the rainbow is, how do I marry up this type of information? And I'll give you another good point, right? And so you brought up geointelligence. Well, how about just simple social media information, right? That happens to be, right, the number one piece of information that analysts, investigators, things along those lines, they're actually tapping into. Well, can you imagine all of the social media data that's out there, and how unconnected it is to what I would call internal data, right? Things that have been curated over time, right? Whether that be case data, records data, things along those lines. So that on the surface right there is a challenge. And that is exactly what Siren is here to do, right? Make sense of, all of different types of data that are available, and that these particular analysts, investigators demand, and then bringing it together and making sense out of it.
I spent a lot of time doing TV, and inevitably when you're in a TV studio and live TV, you would see up on the competition. If you're on CBS, you see ABC and NBC. and maybe Fox or something, or if you're on ABC, the same. And so when I think about what you're talking about, data sources, I think of, okay, so 2 or 3 things years ago to generate information. Now you have a room full of TV screens, and what are the most common data sources, and what are the most desired data sets? I mean, where should you even spend your time? I think this takes it up to the next level of maybe you need an experienced person from Siren to say, look, out of the 500 social media, this is the top 3 to look at, and this is where you focus your time. I mean, that alone in of itself is where to look. It's a start, isn't it?
It is. And it's something that we talk about all the time, right? Every organization that we deal with falls somewhere on what we call the intelligence or investigative intelligence maturity curve, right? From gathering information at its basic level and being able to look at that information all the way up the curve to incorporating artificial intelligence, machine learning, and really making really democratizing data, John, right? So you can imagine all the steps between sort of like getting started to very, very advanced intelligence analytics, right? And Siren and the user capabilities, right? Think about it in an organization, the user capabilities at all of those particular steps vary, right? And so you may have individuals that have user roles that just require search, but you're certainly going to have individuals within an organization and an agency that require some advanced stuff too, right? And so Siren is very well positioned to fit within an organization's intelligence or investigative intelligence curve, and you're going to go on a ride with Siren that's going to take you all the way through should you want to get there.
Well, if you want to go for a ride with Siren, you can also go siren.io and download this white paper. And it's the Government Business Council flash poll. And it talks about all kinds of information and technical capability, data sources, security concerns, timing. And it's a nice little 2-pager, and it's a nice summary of what Siren can do for your agency. Now, last week, I interviewed a network company. We talked about networks, and we talked about data in the networks and discovering data. And there's something there called dark data that people have in the network they don't know. Now, there's networks out there called the dark web. So you got dark data, you got the dark web. And so I would think if I'm an analyst and I'm trying to see what bad guys are up to, I want to go see what's going on in the dark web. And I may not have access to that. But I guess Siren does. Is that right? Do they incorporate that into some of their activities?
Absolutely. I'm glad you brought it up. One, most people or a lot of people don't understand kind of what dark web is, right? And what it requires to actually, be a merchant on the dark web or be on the dark web and things along those lines. But its name in nature attracts, as you could probably imagine, much of the illicit behavior that occurs, right? And so there are like I mentioned, merchants, personas, people out there on the dark web that are trying to just basically sort of hide the behavior and the illegal activity. And so because of that, we find in our line of work that access to that information, is really, really important to people that are trying to put the pieces of the puzzle together. And however, Siren is very good at, as I mentioned, in terms of finding relationships and data, right? So having tapped into the dark web, how do you put that dark web information together with information that you may already have, right? So you may have a handle of somebody that's out on social media, and that handle is an indicator of behavior or that person doing business on the dark web, right? And so imagine if those were 2 autonomous pieces of information, you would not be able to put that together unless you had a joining capability like Siren provides, right? And so at the end of the day, just looking at dark web behavior can tell you interesting things, John, but incorporating dark web behavior with other curated intelligence that you have, social media data, geo, image, LPR, you name it, right? Call data records, all of these things that you have access to, right? Warrant information, case stuff. Put together, it makes a very compelling and powerful case for someone to say, okay, here's what we've got, right? And at the end of the day, as I mentioned earlier, it's actionable intelligence. How do we go take action, and how do we actually, solve the crime?
I'm listening, taking notes, I'm thinking, and all 4 brain cells are working. And I have a friend named Pete Saronis. He has a company called Dots and Bridges. And I said, well, Pete, why'd you name your company that? Well, I connect dot and build bridges. I said, well, no, that's what Siren does. I mean,
that's right.
If you walk through a trade show and you see Siren just waltz over there from 10 feet away, you physically see images on the screen. They can be geographically connected or just thematically connected, but you are connecting the dots. And the reason isn't just for the sake of finding out who the Boston Red Sox fans are. It's trying to figure out some malicious actors, what their activity are. And not everyone's a genius. I mean, people have tells in poker, and bad guys have tells as well. They may not realize that maybe the bad guys are following the Boston Red Sox or a soccer team in Europe, and bang, you got them there, and they didn't even realize that.
Exactly. I enjoy so much doing what we do because of the things I learn on a daily basis, right? I was just with a solutions architect yesterday from Siren with a customer, and we were walking through a financial scenario, and all of the things that you just touched upon, right? All the dots and the bridges, right? And how we were able to identify cryptocurrency movement through, some merchant or organization, Russian organization, that had perpetrated somebody with malware, right? And you're like, oh my God. And this person ended up, paying, right, this particular organization. So that, as you can tell, that information, it doesn't necessarily live, in one particular place, but that information, pieces of that information live in lots of different places. And so there's the connecting the dots and building the bridges, right?
Yeah. Let's jump back to our original discussion about onboarding people, and little John Gilroy waltzes in and tries to figure what's going on. I mean, there's all kinds of openings in the cybersecurity world. I think there's openings in the law enforcement world too. And if I go back to the referenced flash poll you did, the Government Business Council flash poll, if you look at the top of it, 64% said there's difficulty finding employees with the right technical ability. So Number one, you can grow your own, or you can make life easier for the people you have. And so, if someone has analytical capability, they may not understand a lot of the terminology involved with internet protocols, but if they have the basic analytical they can move up from there, can't they? I mean, I think that's the strength there. We're in a situation where you can't find people, and when you find them, how do you keep them, and how do you make their life easier? And this is one simple way to do it, I think.
I think it's a really good point that you make, right? In the sense that, yes, people are having, or it is through the poll, it's evident that they're challenged to find people with the skill sets that, can match what they're looking for them to do. And making that process a little bit easier, seamless, can actually help attract, right, the right type of people for the job. It also reminded me of something, John, that I think you're touching upon that I think is a key point in what I would call the investigative analytical process, right? And the jobs, right, that these people are doing, researchers, analysts. There's something that I like to refer to, and they probably have a technical term for it, but it's called analytical flow, right? And so as the critical thinking process evolves from when you get a lead or when you're diving into a particular problem, it takes you in different directions, inevitably, right? No particular problem is the same. However, the critical thinking that you apply to it, right, continues on. You're like, oh, I'm going in this direction. I need to look at that. I need to look at that. However, the nature of disparate data says that you're going to hit a dead end, and you're going to have to stop what you're doing and go look somewhere else, right? And that pause, what we've seen is a pause in that analytical flow. And the pause in that analytical flow causes delays on the back end in terms of resolution. And so Siren is designed to be that single pane of glass, that multi-source investigative analytical tool that reduces the pausing in the analytical flow process. And I think that's actually really, and we're seeing it with our customers. They say, okay, this is awesome, right? So not only is it easier, right, to get people to fill those positions because of the nature of what we're doing, but the productivity goes way up.
Well, I got to ask a practical question here. I had to get some tires for my car last week. And if I had a piece of software that could take a look at typical people walk into, tire stores and buy tires across the country, certain SUVs and buses and trucks, and I could take that data and I could say, well, here's the John Gilroy software. They'll show you how people buy tires. Okay. Now, when you deal with law enforcement people, how do you walk into a law enforcement organization and say, well, here's an example of look at these people in Chicago. I mean, it's not like people buying tires, or I always talk about buying donuts. It's not donut buyers. This is sensitive information. And so I would think that you have to be, first question I was asked is, what experience do you guys have handling the sensitive information, and what kind of demo are you going to give me? You're going to make up a country? Is it going to be Oz? So how do you do that?
No. All fair. So several customers and lots of experience, right? Whether it's in state and local, large city police organizations, East Coast and West Coast based, federal organizations. And
yeah, I know.
Right. And so the nature of our customer base just says, okay, these guys have experience dealing with this sensitive information. Right. And so it's there, John. Right. No problem.
Well, I'm not going to pursue this because I don't want to get thrown in jail, but this is sensitive information. So I would imagine there's a lot of trust involved in just talking to you about certain problems I have. And so, I think you have to have a reputation in the industry just for them to be able to open up and talk to you about this. And then once that's established, then you can show them what you can do. But you have a lot higher hurdles than other companies I've worked with. I mean, the hurdles you have are technical. We know that, and ability to, but then it's a level of trust there. And that's really where Siren has proven itself in other agencies. So that's really a tough hurdle.
It is. But I'm proud to say that we've cleared that hurdle, right? We wouldn't have the customer base that we have if we hadn't cleared that hurdle.
Yeah,
and I agree 100% with you that, the levels of information that we are dealing with, speaks directly at sort of like the secure nature of the application itself, right? I mean, whether you're running on the high side in the intelligence world, in the intelligence community, or you're dealing with really sensitive personal information, right? So all of those things from a technical standpoint, need to be unquestioned as well. And so again, proud to say we cleared that hurdle on a number of different fronts, right?
Good. If you'd like more information, you can always go to Siren, SIREN.io. And in the show notes, I'll include a link to the flash poll that talks about all kinds of complaints about investigations, data sources, security concerns, evidence, and really the whole idea is to have things turn around quickly because time is of the essence, especially dealing with law enforcement. You have been listening to the Federal Tech Podcast with John Gilroy. I'd like to thank my guest, Brian Gilkey, Sales Director at Siren.
Thanks for listening to the Federal Tech Podcast. If you like the Federal Tech Podcast, please support us by giving us a rating and review on Apple Podcast.